Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome indeed to week 8 of our WiggyWam Get Your Property Questions Answers webinar. Really pleased that you guys have been joining us on this journey over the course of the last 8 weeks. This is something that started out as a bit of an experiment as to really help people with the questions that they got in their house moving journey. And to be honest with you, it's been quite interesting to see the amount of exposure that we've got with this and the amount of people that are sort of sending questions through and also watching our videos online, which has been absolutely amazing. So I'm really pleased that this is taking off, as it were, and it's we're getting a reach out there as far as podcasts are concerned and webinars are concerned, and also helping people with their moving journeys. So if this is the first time you've ever joined us, welcome. And the aim of the webinars is each and every week we take a bunch of questions that users from the WiggyWam community have submitted, and we take the time to sort of go through them in as much depth as we possibly can, and to help and support them in their moving journey with any of the resources that we might have available, which is pretty exciting. So I'm looking forward to today. Hope you guys are too. We'll just let the clock run for a little bit longer whilst we let a few more people join. But I just wanted to point out that we've got just 1 or 2 more copies left of the Home Buyer Secrets book. We were doing a bit of a giveaway on the webinar before last. And if you want a copy of this book, then please let me know, because we've just had another bunch of books printed because they're going out to the press this week, which is going to be pretty exciting. So I'm hopeful that we're going to pick up some traction in the press with that, because I really do feel it's one of these resources that needs to be in the hands of as many people as possible. And that's not me being conceited because I'm the author of the book or anything like that, but it is purely from a perspective of what I've put together in there through 25 plus years of experience in the industry. Is really what I call, I suppose, home buying 2.0, which is a different way of doing things. It's a way that protects people's pockets, first of all, which is the most important thing, and then of course takes them through this journey on getting their deal across the line as fast as possible, because so many times do we see deals falling through at the 11th hour, leaving them with costs and that sort of thing that they have to pay out for, which can be as much as £2,000. And the way I liken it to people is that if I asked you to play Russian roulette with me, and we had a 6-chamber revolver, and we put what do you call it? We put a round in one of the chambers of the 6-chamber gun, and we spun that chamber and we held it up at our head. Most people wouldn't play Russian roulette with me if we were to do that. But if we were to halve the number of chambers, so we've only got 3 chambers in our gun, and we've got 1 bullet. That's the word I was looking for. We've got 1 bullet to go into into one of 3 chambers, and then we spin that revolver and then point it to their heads. That's exactly what we're asking buyers and sellers to do as part of the home buying and selling process. It's a 1 in 3 risk that they're, not necessarily going to blow the brains out, but they're going to blow a big hole in their financial budget if the deal falls through and they lose out. So that's really, as I see, one of the underlying factors that buyers and sellers need to get in place first and foremost before they even attempt to do this journey of buying and selling a home. So, as I say, that's the reason why I want to get the book into the hands of as many people as possible. Obviously, we've got Christmas on the doorstep, so it'll make a great present for somebody, I think, who's looking to move home. And I'm just really excited to share that resource, because, had I known what I know now, sort of 25 years ago, I'm sure I would have been in a much different position. So that's a little bit about that book, guys. Really excited to be joining you again here on another week of the Get Your Property Questions Answered webinar. And without further ado, let's kick off and let's get straight into the questions. But before I do, I just want to have a quick shout out actually to Warren. Warren, thank you for, first of all, being part of the WiggyWam community, but also we asked a question last week, which was around the videos that we're putting out there actually on social media and on YouTube. The number of views that we're getting isn't reflecting the number of people that are actually watching the videos. And we know that because the videos are posted on YouTube, and then we embed them in our site WiggyWam, and it's really interesting to see that we're getting 2 or 3, or well, actually, in this instance, in last week's episode, we had 10 times the amount of people look at it on WiggyWam as we did actually going through YouTube. So it's quite clear that something's not quite working. And Warren answered the question very succinctly by saying that it's something to do with autoplay being enabled, which we need to kick off in order to allow the video to be embedded in different websites and record the views. that we're doing. And that's just something I thought I'd share with you guys, because I'm sure one or two other people have been inspired to do a podcast or something similar after watching these videos. So hopefully that'll add some value to your journey and you won't make the same mistakes that we have. So thanks for that, Warren. Thanks for being part of the community again. And let's kick off with question number one here. Which comes in from Martin. Martin asks, have you ever got your hands dirty on a job site, or are you just a pen pusher? Well, thank you for that question, Martin. Cheeky so-and-so. This is interesting, actually, because I do get a lot of peculiar looks when I'm walking around, especially when you wear a three-piece suit, and people think that you are, an office desk worker and you're a pen pusher, and all the rest of it. And I used to have this quite a bit in when I was a surveyor, because as a surveyor and project manager, I used to go out to commercial sites where we were throwing up, multi-million-pound commercial developments for our clients. And, a lot of the tradies would look at you suspiciously, shall we say, because they just thought that you knew all the textbook knowledge of how to do things and hadn't actually got any real-world experience. And this is something that I used to, how can I put it? I used to enjoy that process quite a bit, because actually I did have a lot of experience at the time, and as time has gone on, I've developed a lot more experience in terms of being hands-on. So I've done up a number of properties throughout my career so far. I've loved it as well, even though sometimes it can be really hard and really frustrating. I could say quite confidently that I'm reasonably competent in a lot of areas. So everything from foundations, drainage, bricklaying. It's not the best, but I can bricklay to a certain extent, and laying blocks. What else can I do? Tiling. Plumbing, I'm pretty good at that. Done a little bit of wiring. Obviously, you have to be certified to do that sort of thing, but in terms of running cables in, I've certainly had exposure of that with my father, who was an electrician previously. I've done all sorts of roofing work, lead work. Plastering is my speciality, if I'm honest. I love doing a bit of plastering. I love the fact that you can hide an enormous amount of sin, shall we say, underneath a freshly plastered wall. But it's one of those things that I love doing in the surveying trade, because when you go and talk to people and you say, hang on a minute, that doesn't look quite right. Sometimes we'd have a tradie that would say, well, hang on a minute, we've always done it this way, we've always done it this way, as though that's enough of a reason to get me to, put my attentions elsewhere. And my response will always be, you might have always done it that way, but actually this is the way that we're going to do it. And it was always surprising if you could pick up the tools and show them exactly how to do it. They were a little bit put out. And in fact, I've actually had, I mentioned plastering as my speciality, but I've actually had plasterers walk off a job because I asked them to do plastering in a way that I wanted them to do it, rather than the way they wanted to do it. And one of the things that I see all the time, and it drives me absolutely out of my mind, and this is not a slant against all plasterers, but it's the way I was taught. And it was in relation to where plasterboard pieces of plasterboard are joined together, you usually get a join line. And what drives me mad is when I see, particularly on ceilings, the fresh plasterboard ceiling goes up, the ceiling is then skimmed, and even though they might put a scrim cloth over the joint, what I prefer to do is to put board bonding between the joint and and over the scrim cloth, and that binds everything together really, really well. So you never get this hairline cracking, because, as I say, it drives me mad when I walk into a new property and you see a hairline crack, and you think, why? I've just paid, however many hundreds of pounds, if not more, for these plasterers to come in and do this work. Why would you accept that as an outcome, really? So, it's been an interesting journey so far. I was recalling, actually, as part of sort of writing this book and amongst other things, I was recalling that my journey in terms of building my property portfolio and getting really hands-on there. I've slept on packing cases. The ovens have come in, in the night, because I remember working on one project before I left my full-time job, and that was the second property that I actually bought for my portfolio. And I took the oven out of the packing case. This is like 1:30 in the morning. And I was just like, what, I'm really tired. I could do with some sleep. So I put these packing cases on the floor, slept on the floor for a couple of hours, and was literally awake at 4:30 in the morning again. I had a big fluorescent site jacket that I put on and wrapped myself up in it, went to sleep for a couple of hours, woke up and carried on just to get this kitchen finished on this property because we wanted to get it rented out. And that's just how I've always been. I've been fairly hands-on and love getting my hands dirty doing these sorts of things. So Martin, don't be fooled by the suit and the and tie and all the rest of it. Very hands-on. Also done quite a lot of work on planning applications, the paper side of things as well for developments, and also building regulations in my previous day job as a surveyor. So that's not really my favourite, if I'm honest. I do enjoy being on site and listening to the banter of the tradies when they're going at each other, which I think is fantastic. But yeah, it's one of those things. As I say, it's been part of my experience. I've loved it. I'm fairly. I'm actually very proud of the way I was brought up, and I was involved in doing projects up actually with my family from a very, very young age. And I'm talking from like 6 or 7. Obviously, there's a limit to how much you can do at that age and how many skills you've got. But certainly I would get, involved with sort of the manual labor, fetching and carrying and all that sort of thing. So, yeah, it's been an interesting journey so far, and it's not over. So if the right project comes along for us in the future, we'll take that on, and I'll probably do a fair bit of it myself, just because I get a kick out of it to stand back and that satisfaction to know that we've done a great job. The house looks great, and you can feel pride looking back and going, yeah, I worked hard, and that was the result. So. Hope that answers the question, Martin. Thanks for your cheekiness there, which is greatly appreciated. And if there's obviously anything else that we can do to support you, let me know. But I think you're all sorted there. So question number 2 comes in from Keith. Hi there, Keith. Thanks for joining us here. Keith's question looks quite a long one. So he said, we completed on a house and moved in last weekend. When we arrived at the property, the seller was still there, and there was still loads of his stuff. We agreed to give him a bit more time, and a couple of hours later, we returned as he was leaving. He had left loads of rubbish and pieces of furniture, and the garden is an absolute tip. He had also taken the majority of the light fittings, leaving bare wires. And he's put in brackets here, these were included in fixtures and fittings. Finally, it looks like he's had a major leak in the bathroom, as there is significant water damage to the living room ceiling, which was not there on viewings. Is there anything I can do about this, as he should surely foot the bill for all the extra costs and work he has dumped on us? Should I speak to my solicitor? Well, thank you, Keith, for the question. Sorry to hear that you've been suffering there, because it sounds like a bit of a nightmare. And I can understand it sometimes when you're moving. And this is the thing that is so frustrating on moving day. And this is why I'm not a fan of people all moving home on a Friday, because things can get, particularly if you're in a chain, things can get bunched up. And it sounds to me like you've hit a problem here where you've tried to move into the property, Keith, and obviously they're still in the process of moving out, and they've left a few things to the last minute and left you with a lot of work and a lot of rubbish. So my response to this one, Keith, would be to definitely speak to your solicitor, because as part of the paperwork process, it's highly, highly likely that they will have agreed to leave the property with complete vacant possession and remove all rubbish and other belongings from the property as well. Okay, now that will have been agreed on the paperwork prior to the contract being signed, and as a consequence, they haven't agreed to what they've agreed to in the contract, or they haven't done what they've agreed to in the contract, should I say. And it's also the same with things like the fixtures and fittings forms, as you quite rightly pointed out there, that the fixtures and fittings forms will have highlighted exactly what they will and won't be leaving. So if they've taken things that they said they were going to leave, that's obviously cause for a claim. But also the fact that they've left things dangerous, they should have, any light fittings that they had and that they've taken should have been replaced with a ceiling pendant and a bulb at the very, very least, just to make that wiring safe. So there's definitely costs, obviously, in putting all of this right. And so I would be speaking to your solicitor about going after the seller for a potential breach of contract, or certainly them recompensing you for the inconvenience of what you've had to endure there. In terms of the leak, I'm hoping that your solicitor had advised you, and it's not clear whether you've exchanged and completed on the same day or whether you exchanged before and then completed later on. But ordinarily, your solicitor should have advised you to insure the property from the moment you exchange contracts. And whilst there is an overlap potentially of insurance policies between you as the buyer and the seller, I would always have that in place because of incidences like this, that God forbid, there's a fire or there's a leak or something of this nature, or there's a big storm. At least there is an insurance policy in place, rather than there being no insurance in place by anybody, and then there leads to be a problem. So I would I would also raise this with your solicitor first and foremost. Find out what their response is in terms of, was the leak there beforehand? Obviously it was, as far as you're concerned, but see whether they're also going to cough up for the cost of repairing that, or make a claim on their insurance. If there wasn't any insurance there, and you've also not got any insurance, then you're probably going to end up in a bit of a bun fight with your seller, and trying to organise who is going to cover the cost of that work. It comes down to proof. Who's going to prove that there was this leak in place? Obviously, you can argue the fact that you've just moved in, you've taken photographs, hopefully, and you can put that forward as part of your line of questioning, if you like, to your solicitor, to go after their seller's solicitor and see what you can do to put that one right. So, yeah, definitely. Majority of that, I would say you've got cause for a claim, and then part of it there as well may be a little bit sticky trying to get through. It might be that you come to a compromise 50-50 that that they'll pay for some of the work and you'll also have to foot some of the bill there. And this actually reminds me of a property that we sold for a very old, very elderly couple. It was a very old house, black and white, sort of chocolate box cottage, and it was sold for a couple who were in their 90s, bless them, and they'd lived there for about 70 years. Honestly, it was one of those where they couldn't believe the price that we were selling it for, because I think they paid something ridiculous, like about £1,000 for this cottage when they first bought it, and we'd sold it at the time, and this is going back probably about 20 years now, we'd sold it for about 350,000, which they just couldn't get their head around. But anyway, they sold the property and they moved out, and they took everything out of the property. They took all the carpets, all the curtains that were worth nothing anyway, but they stripped them all out. They took all of the light fittings, they took all the socket covers, they took all the light switch covers, absolutely everything, door handles, and I was just amazed that this poor buyer, blessing me, arrived at the property and everything had been stripped out, and we were like, oh my goodness. I mean, you have some sympathy obviously with them being elderly, perhaps not fully understood what's meant to happen as part of the buying process, but obviously there was a big financial settlement there to try and recompense the buyer for what should have been there when they bought the property. So hope that helps there, Keith. Anything that you need, please come back to us, let us know, but best of luck with that. Well done for getting into the property as well before Christmas. Hopefully you can iron out those little problems fairly soon, and it's not going to affect your enjoyment of the property for the long term. So good luck with that, Keith. All right. Moving on now, we have question number 3 coming in from Bobby here. Hi there, Bobby. I'm looking to grow my letting agency, but I'm struggling to find a unique selling point between myself and my competition who are competing on fees. Ideally, we'd love to attract more portfolio landlords to us, but they seem very settled with their current agents, so would welcome any tips to get them to transfer to us. Okay there, Bobby. Well, good luck with your lettings business here and growing it. What you've highlighted here, Bobby, I could spend a fair bit of time answering, but I have actually answered quite a few of these points in the sort of estate agents trilogy series. And the main thing I want to point out with having been a landlord and having been in the industry for a long time, there's a lot of misunderstanding, shall we say, and I say this with a whole lot of love and respect. There's a whole lot of misunderstanding between how portfolio landlords buy their properties and then grow their portfolio. And there's a big difference between that and how some letting agents understand how investors buy properties, and it happens because a lot of letting agents are experienced at dealing with accidental landlords or landlords that have 1 or 2 properties. They're not necessarily experienced at dealing with the other end of the scale, which is the bigger landlords who have 20, 30, 40, 100 properties under their belt. And that requires a certain switch in your thinking about how to communicate at their level in terms of how they buy and sell property, but also how they build their business. Because once you understand that bit, and that's explained very succinctly within the books. This is not a pitch for me to sell you a book, by the way. I've just put it down because this is one of the biggest things, having interviewed hundreds of letting agents and estate agents up and down the country. It's one of the biggest roadblocks that we hit with trying to get letting agents on board with portfolio landlords. So a lot of letting agents claim that they want to work with the portfolio landlords, but because they don't understand how they actually work in practice, they can't then communicate effectively in order to win their businesses. And as a consequence, portfolio landlords won't go anywhere near the letting agent. Okay. And I'm just telling it to you straight, Bobby, because, at the risk of offending anybody, if I don't give you the plain truth here, then you're not going to get anywhere, because I'm just going to tell you what you want to hear. And that's not exactly what we're talking about. So one of the things I will say to you, well, there's a couple of things I would approach this with. First of all, it's learn to talk their language. And the first thing you can do on that is to do what we would call portfolio reviews. Okay, now this is something that I see with a lot of landlords where they don't keep an eye on their portfolio, particularly over the course of the last, shall we say, 10, 12, 14 years. With interest rates being so low, they've probably taken their eye off the cash flow ball within their portfolio. So the idea of how a portfolio landlord will buy a property is that they will buy it as a true asset, which means that property puts money in their pocket every single month. Okay, they don't buy into this myth, which is, that the property can lose money or break even every single month, and it doesn't matter because the property is going up in value. That's not how professional landlords will actually view a property. They want money coming into their pocket every single month from renting that property out. Okay, so if you're smart, you're sort of switched on to the idea that the property has to work from a rental income perspective and their monthly outgoings. Okay, and their monthly outgoings are not just the mortgage. And this is probably the biggest misnomer in property investing. The monthly outgoings, not just the mortgage. Okay, it's also the letting agency fee, and most portfolio landlords will be employing a letting agent. And it's also the cost of any repairs and maintenance that go into running that property every single year. Okay, so you've got these deductions that a portfolio landlord will have to take into account that most amateur landlords don't take into account. And when you can bridge that gap in communication, you can start to understand that a portfolio landlord thinks very differently to the amateur. The second thing that they'll also do is that they will want to buy at a discount. And this is one of the things that rubs a lot of estate agents up the wrong way, because the estate agent goes out to value the property and they put a figure on it. Let's say they put £100,000 on as a valuation, and then the property investor will come in at 70,000, and the estate agent will say, "Not a chance. Am I going to put that offer forward? How dare you? You're offending my client," etc., etc. And ultimately, the property investor is just doing it because the numbers make sense in their business. Okay, it's not a slight against how the estate agent has valued the property at all. The property is the property is the property. It's worth what it's worth. But the biggest point is the investor wants to buy it at a discount. And that's very important for the reasons that I outline in these books. And as I say, I don't want you to I don't want to spend too much time dwelling on this, because you've got to read to understand exactly what's going on. But the point of the portfolio review is to look at the income the landlord is receiving on their portfolio at the moment, what their outgoings are, and what the issue could be with their cash flow if interest rates continue to rise, which the likelihood is they will. Okay, so can you track on their portfolio their net cash flow based on interest rates rising over the course of the next 6 months? And what impact does that have on the amount of money that they get in their pocket? Because it might be that some landlords have to look now at offloading some of their properties or restructuring their liabilities, okay, in some way, in order to make their portfolio work for them and continue feeding them, rather than the situation that I've seen with so many other investors where they bought properties at break even or they're losing money on, and then they continue over a long period of time losing money or breaking even. Then something comes along like an interest rate rise and it wipes them out. Okay, so hopefully that helps you, Bobby, in terms of the mindset and the understanding. But the second thing, probably the third thing now, is that if you really want to bag a portfolio landlord, the way to do it is sort of one step at a time. And the biggest first step that you can take is to help them find property deals. So the most successful letting agents that I've seen who have built very solid businesses have done it in a way where they go out and they find the property that they want the property investor to buy. All right. It's a very, very cunning way of building your letting agency, because by going out and finding the property, you're automatically offering something of massive value to your investor list. Now, all of a sudden, imagine that you've got this one property that you know that you've got secured at a below market value figure, and you go out to your list of 10 investors and you say, I've got this property of interest. Okay, this is what it's worth. This is what I can, buy it for. Who wants to buy it? Okay. Now, the property investor that buys it, you're going to charge them a sourcing fee for finding the deal, first of all. The second thing you're going to say to them is that you want to maintain the relationship of letting and managing that property for them. Okay. So you're entering into a trade here, and you have now an opportunity to not only secure a sourcing fee, you potentially have an opportunity to get a project management fee for renovating the property. Okay. And then the third thing you have the opportunity to do is to keep the property for a long time on your books, and then wow that portfolio landlord with your great level of service. And by doing that, you're putting yourself in a strong position where the landlord then has to compare the service they're getting from you and the service they're getting from their current letting agent. And if those two don't measure up, that's how you will bring the portfolio landlord onto your books. Okay. But virtually nobody else in the industry will tell you this, Bobby, because fundamentally they don't understand how property investors truly think. And I know, because I've trained hundreds of them, if not thousands of them. And I'm not saying that to boast, but I'm telling you that's the facts of the matter. And as a consequence, I know exactly how they think and exactly how they're going to approach things when it comes to you talking to them. And it's no word of a lie, Bobby, that I've walked into letting agents and I've talked to them about building a property portfolio in the area, and I've had letting agents scoff at me and say, well, why would you want to build a property portfolio? I hate tenants. That's the letting agent telling me that they hate tenants, and yet for some reason they're a letting agent. Okay, it's just bizarre. But obviously this is not all letting agents. This is rare examples, but the point of me telling you this is to help you understand that when you go out to the marketplace with a different mindset, then a different level of knowledge, then of course you're going to appeal to a different market. Okay, and as I say, that's all contained within the Estate Agency Trilogy series. So if you want a copy of those books, Bobby, reach out to me, let me know, and we'll get those in the post to you straight away, because I think it'll really help you to understand things from a very different perspective. The final thing you can do, of course, is to put a nurturing campaign in place where you regularly nurture those leads through providing valuable information. And I know big hitters in the industry like Sally Lawson talk about this a lot in terms of educating the landlords and bringing them up to date with changes in legislation and all that sort of thing. That's not my speciality. Changes in legislation, frankly, are not that interesting to me, and it's not something that I really want to spend a lot of time dwelling on. But in terms of how to attack the portfolio landlords from a different angle where you offer massive value to them, that's something we can definitely help you with. All right. So hope that helps, Bobby. It might be a bit of a long-winded answer, but I think you've got value there in terms of what I've shared, because this is exactly the thing where I see a lot of letting agents tripping themselves up, and all over social media I can see that they want to achieve this ambition of getting portfolio landlords on their books, but they can't work out how to do it because there's a fundamental piece of the jigsaw that they're missing, which is exactly what I've just outlined, and which is exactly what we talk about in volumes 1, 2, and 3 of Estate Agent Secrets. All right. So thanks for that, Bobby. And anything else you need, as I say, let me know, and I'm more than happy to help you out as much as I can. All right. So question number 4 here, coming in from Paul. Hi there, Paul. Thanks for your question. Paul says, I've been a tenant of a small commercial property for 20 plus years. The landowner wanted to sell to me at an agreed price under the condition that I covered his costs, which I agreed. The solicitor was instructed and the process started. Weeks later, I was informed by his solicitor that the sale was off as they'd had a better offer. There was no negotiation. I just discovered that the seller's solicitor purchased it for the same price and used their law firm partners to carry out the conveyancing. It was all done in the same firm. Now the solicitor is my landlord, and claims any existing tenancy agreement is not legal and my old landlord has no right to rent to me in the first place, yet he made him sign a deed of surrender. I checked with the legal regulator website, and even with my limited knowledge, it seems he has breached a number of things, and there is clearly a conflict of interest. I don't want to be kicked out, but is there anything I can do here, or should I put up and shut up? Wow. Okay, Paul. Thanks for the question, and sorry to hear that you're in this position, because this doesn't sound right at all. It sounds very twisted as to what potentially has happened here, Paul. So I'm going to approach this from a couple of different angles. First of all, I think your first port of call here, Paul, has to be to speak to the landlord or your former landlord and ask them what on earth's actually gone on here, because are they aware, first and foremost, that this scenario has actually unfolded? Are they aware that the solicitor has stepped in to buy the property? Because it may well be that the landlord thought, you know what, actually, I'd rather sell it to the solicitor for whatever reason. And that was the deal that was conducted, but they just didn't bother to tell you. If that's the case, then there's perhaps very little ground for manoeuvre here. But if it's been concealed and the landlord obviously genuinely thought he was selling to you, and there's been a conflict of interest at a very bare minimum, and perhaps a whole lot worse, then if he hadn't agreed to sell to the solicitor and he thought he was selling to you, then this whole thing opens up into a wildly different scenario. Okay, so that would be the first port of call. Speak to the landlords, find out what's gone on, and if it is a case that the solicitor's taken over, then I would go back to the original lease agreement that you signed with the previous landlord and see what had actually been agreed. Now, the problem here is that you say you've been in there 20 years, so the likelihood is the original lease that you agreed was maybe for 3 years or 5 years or 7 or 10 years. And there might have been provisions to extend the lease, but because of the relationship and the fact that you've been paying your rent on time and you've looked after the property and all the rest of it, the landlord may have let those slide. And there may be provisions where you are now out of your lease, or you're occupying it under, I forget the name, but it's like it's almost like you're under adverse conditions of occupancy. And so if that agreement wasn't in place, first of all, or the lease has expired and there's no provision to hold over, then there's kind of very little that you can do other than maybe going to the seller's solicitor and negotiating terms for a new lease with them. But before you do, there is something to take into account here, which is what's known as dilapidations. Now, from a surveying background, dilapidation sounds like a big long word, and you think, what on earth is this? Well, when you go into a property as a tenant, usually a schedule of condition is put in place, which records the condition of the property at the time when the lease is signed. And the agreement usually is that as a occupier, you will agree to return the commercial property back to the landlord in the same condition that you took it on. Okay. Now, I don't know, obviously, what's gone on in the property over that 20-year period. It could well be that if there is no contract or schedule of condition in place, you may well avoid liability for dilapidations. And I would take some legal advice on this. Don't just take my word for it on a webinar, but I would take some legal advice on this. It might save you a fortune in dilapidation payments if you were to exit the property now, okay, rather than potentially taking on liabilities that might otherwise have disappeared if you moved out now, if that makes sense. So that's the way I would look at it. And I'd also work out whether or not it's worth your while negotiating a new lease with the existing, with your new landlord, or whether or not it's worth maybe looking at a completely different property. There might be a newer property, there might be a better property in a better location. There's a lot of properties now on high streets, if your business is a high street location, where you might be able to negotiate a great deal, and that might include rent-free periods and that sort of thing as well. So there's a little bit of homework to do here, Paul, and I would keep my options open, because it may well be that the solicitor is just trying to angle for a rent increase, and that might be a marginal rent increase. It might be a greater rent increase, but by looking around at what else is available, you might be able to negotiate more favorable terms, because the solicitor will be thinking in his head, well, the guy's been there 20 years, there's no way is he going to leave. But if you go back and say, well, actually, there's 3 other properties on the market at the moment, and I can get 6 months rent free on them, and they're in better condition, I want the same terms that that I could get elsewhere if you want me to stay in this property. Okay, so it might not be a completely losing situation. It might be a situation that you can turn to your advantage just by approaching it in a slightly different way. And just with regards to rent-free periods, one of the things to think about is that it doesn't have to be a rent-free period in succession. And what I mean by that is, you could, let's say you agree a 6 months rent-free period on the property, the landlord might be uncomfortable of agreeing, let's say the 6 months rent-free starts on the 1st of January and finishes it on the 1st of July. But what they might agree to is that you have months 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11 as rent-free, and then you pay the rent on the months in between. Okay, so there's different ways of skinning a cat, as they say, but it might be worth looking at that as an option, because it could allow you to make your rent more affordable over the next 12 months, particularly with the sort of cost of living crisis and escalating utility bills and everything else as well. So something to bear in mind there, Paul. And obviously, if I can help with anything else on this, let me know, because it is unfortunate. And as I say, I don't want you to have been duped. If you've been duped, of course, by the solicitor, then there's clearly a case for, I would say, malpractice and conflicts of interest at the very least. And that would be a case of raising the complaint with the solicitor's regulatory body, if that is the case, or if the seller's agreed, already to sell to their solicitor, there's not a lot you can do. And unfortunately, you're just going to have to probably take that one on the chin. But take note of what I've said earlier, and hopefully that will put you in a much better position than you might otherwise have been, rather than just signing a new lease with the existing, with the new landlord, and perhaps taking on the liability for stuff that you might otherwise have been able to walk away from. Okay, hope that helps, Paul. Thanks for the question, and best of luck with that. Hope you'll get it all sorted. All right. And moving on, question number 5's come in here from Leslie. Hi there, Leslie. Leslie says, I have a number of remote buy-to-lets being managed by a lettings agent, 2 of which the tenancy is coming to an end with the tenants leaving the property. For over a month now, I've been trying to get hold of the property manager, but it's proving impossible with no response by phone or email. The tenants are due to move out any day now, and I have no idea if the agent will turn up to check them out and collect the keys. I live part of the year in France, so it's not like I can take care of it. Plus, I'm paying this agency for a service. I would appreciate any advice on how to deal with the situation. Okay, Leslie, thanks for the question, and sorry to hear Sorry to hear that you're in that position. Excuse me, tripping over my words, but sounds like living part of the year in France is no bad thing. So I hope that is working out well for you. In terms of what you've asked here, couple of things how I would approach this for you, Leslie, if I was in your position. First thing I would do is I would contact a competing letting agent in the town or area of the city that your current letting agent is in. And I'd be asking them a couple of questions. First of all, has your letting agent closed down? Have they been bought out? Have they closed up shop? Is there some issue? Have they are they suffering with ill health or all that sort of thing? There could be many, many reasons why you're not getting through to them. And the competitor agent may well know. So first of all, you're asking for a bit of advice. But secondly, you can explain the situation to them and ask them if, what the process would be if they were to take over the management of these properties. Now, before you do that, you might want to send your current letting agent an email as a sort of complaint and outline exactly what you've just said to me and say, look, this is what's going on. Been trying to get hold of you. These are my emails and my phone calls that I've made to you. You haven't responded, and I'm very concerned. So the idea being, if the letting agent doesn't respond, and let's say you give them 7 days within which to respond, or less, obviously, if you've got tenants moving out, then I would talk to the competing letting agent and maybe to even talk to 2 or 3 to get different feedback and different ideas and different understandings of the level of service that they're able to offer to you. And then you can look at transferring your business to a letting agent who respects you and actually wants to do business with you, rather than sort of ignoring your calls and emails. So if they're assuming they're in the same town, that agent can then walk to your existing agent and arrange for handover of the files and handover of the keys and handover of the deposit and all that sort of thing, and let them take care of that burden, rather than you having to get stressed out because you're a few thousand miles away or what have you, and you can't get back to handle it all. So I'm sure any other letting agent will gladly swoop in and grab the business from an underperforming agent. And if you've got a number of properties, you are a portfolio landlord, that's some letting agent's going to welcome that as a sort of uptick in their business. So that's exactly what I would do. And obviously, if there's any complications in that process, they should be able to guide you through that in terms of releasing the deposit or taking over schedules of condition. But depending upon how bad this situation has become, Leslie, you might have to take 1 or 2 things on the chin in terms of dealing with the tenant going out, and perhaps being a little bit more lenient on the schedule of condition or the inventory, should I say, on the property, particularly if it's all been left right to the very last minute, because it might be unfair to put that extra burden and pressure onto the tenant if the letting agent hasn't performed on your behalf. Okay, so see what you can do to work your way through that one, Leslie. I think, as I say, a competing letting agent will jump at the chance to work with you, particularly as you're a portfolio landlord. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how this one turns out for you, because I'm a great believer that things like this happen for a reason. And although it can be a frustration at the moment, you might actually find out it turns out to be one of the best things that happens to you. Okay, because it's not unheard of, and I'm not saying this has happened in your situation, so don't freak out here, Leslie, but it's not unheard of for letting agents to close their business, and it is rare, but as I say, it's not unheard of. But they can close their business, and then the people have run off with deposits that tenants have. These have run into thousands or tens of thousands of pounds that letting agents have run off with. So, as I say, I'm not saying this is happening in your situation, and it is a rarity, but you just never know what's going on behind closed doors. It could be a grief, and they could be grieving the loss of somebody in their family, or anything of that nature. And the important thing is to not make assumptions, but to get access to information and find out what's actually gone on behind the scenes. So hope that helps, Leslie. If there's anything obviously we can do, let me know. If you want an approved letting agent in the area where your properties are, again, let me know. I might know 1 or 2 people in my little black book that can help you out there. And I'll look forward to hearing how you get on with that, and give me some feedback when you can. So thank you for that question, Leslie. That wraps up all of the questions that I've had submitted in today. So I hope this has been informative for you guys. As always, I really appreciate all of the questions that you guys are sending in as part of our WiggyWam community. Please, 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 if you have friends or family members that are currently moving house or thinking about moving house, please enroll them onto these webinars. As I say, it's not for me to blow my own trumpet or get in front of a wider audience, other than to help and support them, because a lot of these questions that come out the woodwork can be the difference between a very successful move and a not so successful move. So I'd love to help as many people as we can with these webinars. We take the time to do them every week for precisely this reason of answering questions like we've just had. And I love sharing a little bit of helpful advice and knowledge. And again, if we can get people the answers that they're looking for, because what I've found, guys, from spending 20 plus years in the industry, is when people have got a problem like this, sometimes just one sentence can change the course of their lives. And I know that sounds drastic, but I've had it before where one guy in particular was dealing with a particular problem, and for love nor money, he just couldn't resolve that issue. But one little conversation, one little piece of information fundamentally changed the course of his life, because he was able to sort out the problem and put that weight of indecision and that weight of carrying that burden of that problem around, put it all down and move on. So that's the reason why we take the time to do this, guys. There are tens of thousands of people who are frustrated with their moving journey. And as much as I want to try and answer as many questions as I can through things like the books that I'm putting out there, and these webinars, there are, as I say, thousands of other people that need help and support. So please do share these podcasts with and these webinars with as many people as you can. Please invite them to our weekly webinar. Please invite them to the WiggyWam website, which is wiggywam.co.uk, and invite them to send their questions in to us at happytohelp@wiggywam.co.uk, or ask them to send them in via Twitter, and our Twitter handle is @WiggyWam_UK. That's @WiggyWam_UK. All right, guys. So thank you once again for joining me here today. I'm looking forward to next week's webinar already. And that will be my final one before I jet off to India. But I will be doing this from abroad. I don't quite know how the time difference is going to work out. It's probably going to be very late at night with that sort of thing. But I'm very much looking forward to getting a bit of sunshine in and visiting the family over there. So as I say, anything I can do to help and support you guys, let me know. Otherwise, I will look forward to seeing you next week. All right. Thanks ever so much for joining me, and see you again very soon. Take care.